Do you want to be rich? The answer is education, education, and education. But probably not the kind you're thinking of. That's according to personnel finance author Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote the best-selling Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a household name for anyone interested in personal finance. Right now, many of you are experiencing a financial recession, mostly brought on by COVID-19. Plenty of businesses have shut their doors while many others have laid off employees, and the effects are being felt in most corners of the world. So, when everything seems to be against us, is there an absolutely easy way to become wealthy? In times like these, fear creeps in and further sabotages our plans for becoming economically relevant again. But there is more than one way of being smart about money during a financial crisis and assuring that the effects of future recessions are not disastrous. To drive home this message, we have Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the international best-selling book series on personal finance, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, with us today. Robert is here to talk about the most challenging lessons he has learned from business and how you can thrive in the midst of a recession. You're only poor if you give up. The most important thing is that you did something. Most people only talk and dream of getting rich. You've done something. That's Robert Kiyosaki. If you're ready to do something about your situation, instead of giving up on your dreams, then you, my friend, are at the right place. But before we begin, I would quickly like to introduce you to this charismatic human, Robert Kiyosaki. Robert Kiyosaki is an entrepreneur, investor, motivational speaker, educator, financial knowledge activist, and best-selling author who firmly believes that the world needs more entrepreneurs who can create jobs. Robert is the founder of Rich Global LLC and the Rich Dad Company, a private financial education company that imparts personal finance and business education to the masses through videos and books. Robert's internationally acclaimed book series, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has sold massively worldwide. It compares his two dads. One was poor, biological father, and the other was a fictitious rich dad. The poor father was very educated, but had no money. In contrast, the rich father was a high school dropout and was, in fact, Hawaii's richest man. This book is a must-read if you're starting out on your financial journey. Robert's got a new book out, Who Stole My Pension? How Can You Stop the Looting?, which is now available online for purchase. Some people are looking for a challenge. Some are looking for security. Robert Kiyosaki. Let's first try to understand the three kinds of people that exist according to Robert. To understand the philosophy to get rich, it's important to know about the three types of people who exist according to him. There are three kinds of people in the world. The first kind is fragile. They're like champagne flutes. You hit them, they shatter. The second kind is called robust. A robust person is like a rock. You can pound a dump on them. They take it, but that's all they do. And then there is the anti-fragile, who is somebody who gets smarter and better because of the crap that is dumped on them. Such people thrive. Robert Kiyosaki. Robert says that if you're afraid of dying, you're already dead. In the Marines, they call such people corpsemen. A corpseman is a person who is already dead but doesn't know it yet. The fear of dying keeps one anxious on their toes, mainly because they have given up. If you're not taking action to take back control of your life, health, and finances, you'll never come out of the pit you're in. The pandemic has been a testing time for all of us across the globe. The baby boomers in the older generation suffered as they lost all their pension, health care, and more. But Robert believes that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented itself as an opportunity, at least for the younger generation of millennials. Are you curious to know how? The pandemic-induced crisis is the best thing that ever happened to the youth. When you think of something like the iPhone, you have more power in that iPhone than I had with my mainframe computer. The economy may be bad now, but this is the best time for the millennials because you are all tech-savvy. I'm not tech-savvy, but you guys have got this made for you. The older generation like me are being cleaned out by the pandemic. Robert Kiyosaki. There's a beautiful example of how bad times in the end almost always lead to good times. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, when you, the younger generation, sit down and think about your life, you'll either think of how those years screwed you up or hurt you, or you'll ponder over how to make the best of the things you have learned through all the hardships. If you find yourself in the latter, then you will always find a way to build upon your skills, get more creative and hungrier with growth, and eventually find yourself surrounded by opportunities for your taking. The vital thought behind his financial advice is to decide to be rich. He often says his works are only those who have decided to be rich, and those who believe things like we should live below their means are not supposed to read him or listen to him. Let's try to understand what he has to say about it. One night in 1975, he said he sat in his little apartment and began to choose the path he had to take. That night in 1975, I had to stop feeling sorry for myself and decide again to be rich. I went over some of the lessons my rich dad had given me, lessons that were more important than money because they would ultimately create the financial empires I wanted. He then remembered what his rich dad used to say. The only difference between the rich, poor, and middle class, he said, is the kind of lifestyle they want. You don't have to be psychic to tell a person's future. If you listen to the words a person uses, they'll tell you their future. Rich Dad believed that words were a person's most important tool. He constantly reminded me to watch the words once spoken, simply because he believed that the words you speak and the words you think ultimately become the world you live in. He often quoted the Old Testament, and the word became flesh. Robert says that he noticed that poor people often said, "I just want enough money to pay the rent. I need a few dollars to get to the next payday. After I pay my bills, I don't know how my family can afford to eat." People who used words such as these often focused only on financial survival. Rich Dad often referred to these people as poor people because they were poor managers of money. So a person who thought or spoke words such as these were constantly fighting for financial survival, regardless of how much money they made. The middle class used different words because they had different ideas about how to use their money. Our home is our most important asset and our largest single investment. We're setting a few dollars aside every month so we can afford the down payment on our dream home. We're saving money for our children's college education and our retirement. I noticed that the middle class focused on comfort. That's why so many of them say, "I don't want to be rich, I just want to be comfortable." While the words his rich dad, rich friends used were, "How did you finance your shopping center? Did you syndicate it with a joint venture partnership, or did you go to the hard money lender for the interim money? My underwriter has a new private placement, pre-IPO offering. Do you want a position in it? I bought the shares through my corporation because the long-term tax consequences are better." The rich use the vocabulary found in the asset column, Rich Dad said. The rich are rich because they're not focused on day-to-day short-term survival or the expense column as the poor are. Nor are the rich focused on comfort and the acquisition of liabilities using credit, as the middle class is. The rich are rich because they focus on the long-term acquisitions of assets. Assets such as stocks, bonds, businesses, and income-producing real estate. Many times the rich will forsake meals, a steady paycheck, a vacation, or the comfort of a nice home to build or acquire real assets. So decide to be rich, even if you're broke and penniless today. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki wrote of the difference between being poor and being broke. Poor is a state of mind where thoughts such as, "I can't afford it," or "live below your means" come from. Being poor is eternal, but being broke is temporary. The opening chapter of the cash flow quadrant is called, "Why Don't You Get a Job?" It begins with his wife Kim and him being homeless for about 3 weeks. Even though we were virtually out of money, we continued to strive to become rich, to build a business and invest through that business. Today, even though they have plenty of money and several businesses, nothing much has changed. They continue to build businesses, reinvest in their businesses, and invest through those businesses. In the cash flow quadrant, he wrote about be, do, have. Be is the most important part of the 3-word formula. Most people want to have what the rich have, but they often are not willing to do what the rich do, to have what the rich have. So whether you have money or not, it's important to be rich if you decide to do so, which means being willing to make being rich more important than merely surviving financially or being comfortable.